For Arizona and the nation, the stunning finale of an epic journey.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States, Donald Trump.
Our state staying red in the election of a new president and other top officials.
The one message that came through loud and clear in this election is that Americans want progress now.
So let's continue to celebrate. This is a landslide for us.
We asked Republican and Democratic leaders, how will the Trump victory change Arizona? Plus, what went wrong in Douglas? The story of why thousands waited for hours to vote. This is Arizona Week. Hello everyone, I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thanks for joining us. It's a fact, Arizona stayed red, despite predictions last month that Hillary Clinton had a bigger percentage chance of winning Arizona than Donald Trump. The pollsters were wrong. Only 4 counties, Pima, Santa Cruz, Apache, and Coconino favored Mrs. Clinton. And while Democratic Congressman Raul Grijalva won re-election unopposed in southern Arizona, many key races in the state landed in the laps of Republicans, including John McCain and Martha McSally.
There's a lot of issues that divide people in this community and in the country, but I'll tell you, there's far more that unites us than divides us.
After one of the most divisive election years on record, there's now talk on both sides of the aisle of healing a broken system. Pima County Republican Party Chairman Bill Beard is here to share his take on this remarkable week and where we go from here. Bill, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Were you surprised by Donald Trump's victory?
No, I wasn't. If anyone had actually been listening, not necessarily to specific words that Donald Trump was using this year, but where he was tapping into people's anxieties and where their hearts and minds were, he found a way to channel the average American citizen's concerns about the economy. I've read that in the last 8 years, the folks that benefited from the Obama economy were only the top 20%. The other 80% of the wage and salary earners in this country have either seen their earnings stagnate or actually decrease in the last 8 years. That's not healthy for an economy. I don't care whether you're at the top or not. If 80% of the population is stagnant or decreasing, that's a bad thing.
Every single American will have the opportunity to realize his or her fullest potential. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
Donald Trump tapped into that concern and essentially that American idea that we want to have an American dream, and we expect that that dream is going to be better for our children. A number of pollsters have been saying for a long time that both left and right had come to an agreement. We no longer believe that the American dream is real for our kids. Something like 70–80% of the population is actually saying they truly do not believe that their children would be better off than they are. That is about the most un-American thing that you can talk about. Donald Trump says no. We're going to restore the dream so your kids and your grandkids will have a better future. And folks looked at the alternative and said, stagnant continuation of what we've got, or somebody that's going to give me a chance for my kids and my grandkids to be better off. That's a no-brainer.
Donald Trump and President Obama met this week in the White House and said they would work together, but we're still seeing protests and demonstrations. What does that say to you?
Well, it says to me a couple of things. Number one, I don't recall when George Bush left office and President Obama won, protests from the right in the street saying, no, this is wrong, etc. So the folks on the left that seem to be overreacting and taking to the streets, you have to ask what's motivating them. How many of them are actually paid to go do so? From what we've seen from some of the reporting done, that there's a lot of folks that have actually paid the social justice warriors, if you will, to actually be the protesters. So that's one thing. The other is, I think it speaks to a sense in this country that if my side wins, I'm entitled to everything that comes with the power. And the folks that lost somehow need to take a back seat forever and a day. That's not the way the system is designed. And if my side loses, okay, the majority have spoken. They get to, their elected leader gets to take office for however long. And next go round, if my side wins, my side gets a chance to take over and be the one in charge for whatever period of time. That's the way our system was designed. I've heard folks say, well, this is unfair and whatnot. Find me another system that's quote unquote fair and we can discuss it. But as the old saying goes, we have the worst system possible except for all the others. It's about the best mankind has been able to come up with, and I haven't really seen much in the way of improvement coming around for 240 years. We got a system that works.
The Affordable Care Act is under scrutiny right now. A lot of people worry that it could change once Donald Trump takes office. Should people be worried about their health insurance changing?
Well, number one, the premise is that somehow the Affordable Care Act is the be-all and end-all. I think even a significant portion of the folks on the Democrat side have been very worried about some of the things that are going on with Obamacare. You know, in Phoenix alone, we've got skyrocketing rates. This next year, the average is what, over 100% increase in premiums. I don't care what your likes or dislikes are about Obamacare, that's a bad thing. And if you don't change Obamacare, either by replacing it with something that works or basically scrapping the whole thing and even going back to what we had before Obamacare, it would be a vast improvement for the majority of Americans. I do believe that there are folks out there that have seen some benefit from it in terms of getting insurance, but it's come at an incredibly steep price for even the folks that have received that new care. The premiums alone, even for folks that can afford the Obamacare rates, have skyrocketed their overall health care costs to the point where many people have actually foregone paying for insurance and accepted the IRS penalty simply because the combined cost of their premium and their deductibles now that are $5,000, $6,000 a year, most average folks can't afford that. I would say the Affordable Care Act is anything but affordable.
Dreamers, a lot of concern over what's going to happen with DACA. Should people be worried about the future?
The executive order that the president signed, I think even the most objective folks on left and right would agree that he should not have done that. It should have gone through the legislature and be debated and voted upon by the legislature. The president had a majority in both houses of Congress in his first 2 years in office. Why he didn't do something then, you'd have to ask him. Moving forward, I think Donald Trump was elected for one simple reason. We are a country of laws. And if there are laws on the books and we are not enforcing those laws, we cannot continue to call ourselves a country of laws. He was elected so that the laws that are on the books can be enforced. If there is someone that has violated those laws, you suffer the consequences in this country. If there's something that needs to be changed legislatively, then that is the route. If you believe you have the majority support of your position for allowing folks to stay or whatever, there are many, many alternatives to an executive order from the commander-in-chief to achieve that goal. I would say Donald Trump was elected because for one of several reasons, but one of the prime ones was to make sure that the laws we have on the books get enforced.
Children also a part of that?
Again, you're either a country of laws or you are not. There are folks today that are minors that have committed infractions, you know, whether it's TUSD, walking down the street, whatever. Should they suffer the penalty for violating those laws? I think the average person, if you get them to sit down and say, okay, I get it that this person has some you know, concerns over that, but again, are we a country of laws or are we not?
The border economy, very important to Arizona. What if Donald Trump changes NAFTA?
I think with NAFTA, you're probably going to see some modification to it. I know some of the language has said that it was going to be completely scrapped. We do have a system in this country that when a treaty is signed, if you're going to unsign it, it takes more than just the president to do that. We'll see what the Congress wants to do about NAFTA moving forward. I do believe that Donald Trump was elected with a mandate to change our foreign policy in terms of how we do trade deals. And as he was frequently saying, we need to have trade deals that are actually fair for all Americans, not just some. And we'll probably see some things moving forward where those policies get implemented.
Bill, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Last night, I congratulated Donald Trump and offered to work with him on behalf of our country. I hope that he will be a successful president for all Americans. This is not the outcome we wanted or we worked so hard for, and I'm sorry that we did not win this election for the values we share and the vision we hold for our country.
Arizona Democrats are still reeling from the shock and awe of Donald Trump's victory and the Republican dominance of the House and the Senate. How will our state's 4 Democratic Party members of Congress deal with it? We sat down with U.S. Representative Raul Grijalva, who just won re-election unopposed. Well, Congressman, thanks so much for being here. You must be gratified about your re-election to Congressional District 3. Now, though, the challenge may be for Democrats working with Donald Trump. How do you personally feel about that?
Well, I think one has to be honest. I think I was stunned by his victory, as I think many people were, having the tendency to believe the polls and believe that Hillary was doing much better in some states and projected to do much better in those states than really occurred. All those states she was projected to win, swing states she lost, and so I was stunned. But I think we go forward. We closed the gap a little bit in the House. We didn't win the Senate back. You have a Republican president and a Republican Congress. And so many things that Barack was able to stop by either vetoing them or not dealing with them that came out of the House of Representatives, now some of them will be landing on Trump's desk. And I think we need to prepare for the fact that those things that he said during his campaign, he's going to try to accomplish. So it's a strategy of where we can work together, fine. I'm all for that.
As you've said, Republican control in the White House, the Senate. Will that be a challenge? I mean, an extreme challenge for Democrats, or is it workable?
It depends on attitude. Look, some of the things that Trump is going to confront immediately. What's he do about the president's executive order on the XL pipeline? Is he going to rescind that? And then I think you're going to hear from the American people that and the people that pushed the president to not sign that. Then you're going to have DACA for the Dreamers. That order comes up again in January every 2 years. Now, is Trump going to, as he said in the campaign, undo that, or is he going to retain it? You have those kinds of issues, the climate change accords in Paris, is he going to pull out of them or not? You have those kind of issues that are going to galvanize people and be a lot of pressure on the White House, not just on Congress. So it's how Republicans handle what I think to be potentially very delicate issues. And in a spirit of unification, what are they going to do? As much as it is going to be a huge challenge for Democrats to try to operate in the environment, I think there's equally pressing challenge. When you consider the popular vote, not by a huge margin, but the majority of the American people supported Hillary in the popular vote, not so in the Electoral College. There's a balance that if Trump wants to, he can strike, but we'll see what he's prepared to do.
You worked very hard to campaign for Bernie Sanders and then Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
So what went wrong?
I think Democrats, there's a lot of soul searching going on right now. And, after this election, what went wrong? Let's analyze it. I think, we're all doing that. But I think fundamentally, the Democratic National Committee needs to be cleaned up and reformed, period. The themes, the strategies, the consultants that we use over and over and over again haven't proven to be to the task. If this organization is going to be the organizational vehicle for Democrats nationwide, and with midterm elections coming up in 2 years, I think it's time that we looked at what that that organization does and doesn't do for Democrats in terms of who they recruit, what themes they run on. And where I think the boat was missed, there was a great deal of angst among working people in this country, across racial lines. Angst about what's the future going to be like with the young people. Where is this future? And Bernie was able to connect to that in a very authentic way, in a different way, but still connect with Trump. The solutions were totally different on how to deal with income inequality and affordability for college and reforming our financial services system. Totally different. But Trump was able to say it's us versus them. The reason we're in this problem is because of them. And effectively used it through the whole campaign and won. That was the difference. And I don't think that ever at the presidential campaign level, we understood what that theme was and connected with people.
Hillary Clinton didn't perform very strongly with Hispanics as many had suspected she would. Where was the disconnect?
Sometimes the issues of anxiety over the economic future, that cuts across racial lines. If you're a middle class or working class person and you're looking at your family and you're not quite sure where that family is going to be in 10 years or what security they're going to have in 10 years, they look to somebody that believe is strong and is going to change that system. They don't know what the change should be. And I think that part of the economic disconnect that we had throughout this campaign with working folk. Those are natural constituents of Democrats, and we have got to reestablish our connection to that group of voters.
You're back in Washington next week. What is your attitude? What is your approach?
I think it's the same. You know, work hard, be productive and compromising when I can be, and be a very effective opponent when I have to be.
Congressman, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Our political reporter Christopher Conover has been tracking the fallout from this week's election and joins me now with a lot to talk about.
Lots to talk about after this election. John McCain easily won his 6th term in office, defeating Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick by more than 225,000 votes. On election night, he greeted supporters and well-wishers.
Let me begin by saying thank you to my employers, the people of Arizona, those of you who voted for me, and those who voted for my opponent. I've never been more honored by anything than the privilege of representing you in the United States Senate.
As supporters listened, he told them the nation's leaders now must do what every generation before has accomplished.
I promise you, I will work as hard as I ever have, use all my knowledge and experience and relationships, and extend an open hand to our new president and my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to solve our problems together as fellow Americans who have more in common than we have differences.
The final results made the race look easy for McCain, but he called it the toughest of his political career. His opponent, Democratic Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick, did not have a primary, so she was able to fully concentrate her efforts on defeating Senator McCain.
It's time for term limits because decades in Washington change people.
She issued a written statement on election night thanking supporters and saying she's proud of the work they did and the civil way they did it. If the Senate campaign was the marquee race, the other race getting national attention was Arizona's 2nd congressional district. Incumbent Martha McSally easily defeated Democrat Matt Hines by tens of thousands of votes. A particularly noteworthy achievement because 2 years ago she won by 167 votes.
Democrats, independents, and Republicans voted for me in a pretty strong way, and so I'm very honored and grateful for that. And it shows that they've seen that I'm working hard and trying to find where there's common ground to make a difference, and trying to do that for everybody.
Matt Hines says he's willing to reach across the aisle.
This election has taught us a lot about, well, I think we really need to work on healing divisions, and it's something that I'm particularly interested in doing, not only in a legislative way or as a political, as a politician, but it's something that I've dedicated my life to.
Arizona voters statewide also chimed in on 2 ballot propositions. The first, Prop 205, would have legalized the recreational use of marijuana for people over the age of 21. It failed. Prop 206, which raises the minimum wage to $10 an hour beginning in January, easily passed.
Lorraine, those results are expected to stand even though there are a few 100,000 votes still left to be counted statewide. Election officials say that should wrap up during the week.
Okay, Christopher, thank you. Immigrants represent one group of Arizonans who are worried by the election of Donald Trump. Under an executive order called DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the Obama administration has helped young people avoid deportation if they came to this country under the age of 16. But what happens when Donald Trump becomes president? Arizona Public Media's Nancy Montoya is here to explain why some people are scared. Nancy, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Let's start off with, how does one become a dreamer?
Dreamers, of course, was an executive order that was issued by the Obama administration. Technically, if you're under 31, age 31, and were brought here as a child under the age of 16, you could get deferred action status. So in Arizona right now, we have around 20,000 of the dreamers.
A lot to lose. Is there a real fear factor for these?
You know, I've been talking to dreamers for the past 48 hours, and there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of angst and anxiousness right now because they don't know. One of the biggest fears that they have is that their education, if they're in college, will be greatly impacted. Right now, the dreamers have been afforded in-state tuition for, here at the University of Arizona, it's around $11,000. Out-of-state tuition, if they're made to pay out-of-state tuition, it would be about a 300% increase in tuition to about $35,000 a year.
A year for tuition. So legally, what can happen? What are the ramifications?
Well, the ramifications are unknown right now. We're at a point where everything is on hold until January 20th when the Trump administration takes over. One of the big fears that the dreamers have is that in order to get this deferred action status, they had to register officially with the government, which meant they had to give their name, their address, their next of kin, all their contact information so they could be easily reached if need be. Attorneys and the dreamers are concerned that now this information is in the hands of the government. And if there is a mass deportation, which has been threatened but is unlikely to happen, but if it is, many of the dreamers say, could we be the first ones out the door because the government knows where we are?
Okay. The dreamers have a lot of support. There are big names who are supporting these groups. So what has been their reaction to all this?
Everyone from LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, to the Hispanic College Fund, there's this coming together within the Latino and non-Latino communities. My understanding is that in Washington next week, there's a meeting of 30 Latino groups who are coming together, not to protest, but to understand what next. What do we do next? Where do we go from here?
Very interesting, Nancy. What else are you working on for us?
Well, Lorraine, another troubling story I've been working on is following this week the voting nightmare in Cochise County. On Election Day, voters were stuck in extremely long lines for hours in Douglas and other surrounding neighborhoods and cities. AZPM was there to record what happened. It's 7:55 on election night in Douglas, nearly an hour after the polls were supposed to close. Hundreds of people are still waiting for the chance to vote. This line so long, we're speeding up the video so you can see the full effect of what it was like for these voters. Carla, what time did you get here?
At about 5:50.
And how long are you prepared to wait?
I waited this long, I'm not about to leave.
Voting officials tell us all day long, polling places were jammed across Cochise County. Thousands of determined people had to wait up to 2 to 3 hours to cast their ballot.
It is a testament to see people here still, and they're willing to vote.
But some voters weren't happy when they learned 2 polling places, including this one, temporarily ran out of ballots.
Really? Somebody didn't plan very well.
Now, in prior years, there were 49 polling places open throughout Cochise County. This year, it was cut back to 18. And today, there was only 1 polling place open in the entire city of Douglas. While cutting polling places by 62%, voters can now use any vote center in the county, not just their neighborhood location. But that didn't seem to help.
It's really discouraging that the way it is set up, it almost looks like it is set up for failure.
Cochise elections director Katie Howard acknowledges they underestimated the turnout for Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
We were caught off guard, and obviously, I would say yesterday we did not have enough voting equipment. I don't necessarily agree that we had too few voting centers.
In addition, Howard says some voters had trouble with new touchscreen voting equipment introduced earlier this year. Some question whether the long lines affected voting access and fairness for some people who could not wait in line due to age, illness, work, or family.
A lot of people have left, and the whole time that I've been here now for 3 hours, there's been a lot of people who left, a lot of elderly who have left. So of course it affects, because now they're not voting, and it would make a difference.
The nonpartisan Arizona Advocacy Network says long lines with 200 to 300 people waiting 2 to 3 hours serves to disenfranchise many. The elections director disagrees.
Okay, I would not use the term disenfranchisement. I would say that our voters had a difficult time yesterday.
Joe Canfield is an election attorney and former elections director for the state.
So the Arizona legislature has always been very concerned about lines at the polls. In 2006, they enacted a law that requires the polling place lines to be no longer than 1 hour, and a violation of that law is a Class 2 misdemeanor.
In Cochise County, officials say they are concerned about the state's requirements.
I do personally apologize to the voters who had to wait in line. We will make adjustments.
Now, with an assurance from officials that they will overcome these problems, a lot of people in Cochise County will be watching very closely to see how the next election goes.
They've got 2 years to get it right.
They sure do.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. Finally, we'd like to acknowledge Veterans Day and honor our military men and women who have served our country so well. In particular, our hearts go out to the family of 30-year-old Staff Sergeant Kevin J. McEnroe of Tucson. He was killed this past week in Jordan. Sergeant McEnroe died of wounds sustained when his convoy came under fire. McEnroe was a Green Beret stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Arizona is home to over 500,000 veterans, all with unique tales of service. This weekend on Arizona Illustrated, you'll see a program helping vets transition to a post-military life. Two Tucsonans share their memories of Vietnam, plus a place where homeless veterans are welcomed and protected. And we'll take a look back at those who man nuclear missile silos. Veteran Stories on Arizona Illustrated, Saturday at 6:30 in the evening and Sunday morning at 11:30 on PBS 6. And that's our program this week. I'm Lorraine Rivera, and we hope to see you next week for another edition of Arizona Week. Thanks for joining us.